The autumn afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace, casting long shadows across the ornate sitting room where Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge, found herself alone. The year was 2011, and she had been married to Prince William for only 6 months. The weight of royal tradition pressed upon her shoulders as heavily as the silk dress she wore for yet another formal engagement. In the corner of the room stood an antique mahogany display case, its glass doors reflecting the light like mirrors. Inside, arranged on velvet cushions, lay several pieces from the royal collection. Catherine's eyes were drawn, as they often were, to a particular sapphire and diamond necklace that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. The necklace had belonged to Princess Diana, William's beloved mother, and it held a significance that went far beyond its monetary value. Catherine approached the case slowly, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor. She had seen William look at this necklace with such profound sadness and love that it made her heart ache. The sapphires matched the engagement ring she now wore, Diana's ring, which William had given her as a symbol of continuity and love. But the necklace remained locked away, a museum piece rather than a living part of their lives. The palace staff had left her alone while preparing for the evening's state dinner. Catherine found herself standing before the case, her reflection mingling with the sparkle of the jewels. She thought about Diana, the mother-in-law she would never meet, whose shadow both protected and haunted her new life. Every public appearance brought comparisons, every gesture analyzed for similarities or differences. The press called her the new Diana, but Catherine knew she could never replace the people's princess. Her fingers traced the outline of the case's brass handle. She had been told about the protocol, the permissions needed, the forms to fill, the committees to consult. But in that moment, she felt an overwhelming desire to hold something that had touched Diana's skin, to understand through physical connection what kind of woman had worn these jewels and captured the world's heart. The handle turned more easily than she expected. The case wasn't locked. Catherine's heart began to race as she realized the significance of this moment. She could simply reach in and touch the necklace, perhaps even try it on. Who would know? She was the future queen consort, after all. Didn't she have some right to these family heirlooms? As she opened the glass door, a memory surfaced of William telling her about his mother's funeral, how he had walked behind her coffin as a young boy, trying to be brave while the world watched. The necklace had been one of Diana's favorites, he had said, worn to numerous charity galas where she had danced and laughed and raised millions for causes close to her heart. Catherine's hand hovered over the necklace. The sapphires were even more beautiful up close, each stone perfectly cut and set, surrounded by diamonds that caught every fragment of light. She could imagine it around Diana's neck, complementing her blonde hair and blue eyes, drawing attention not to the jewels, but to the woman who wore them with such grace. The sound of footsteps in the corridor made Catherine freeze. They were measured, deliberate steps that she recognized immediately. Charles, the Prince of Wales, appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable as he took in the scene before him. Catherine's hand was still extended toward the necklace, caught in the act like a child reaching for forbidden candy. For a long moment, neither spoke. Charles's eyes moved from Catherine to the open display case, to the necklace that had once adorned his former wife. The air in the room seemed to thicken with unspoken emotions and memories. Catherine straightened, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment and something else, defiance perhaps, or determination. Charles entered the room fully, closing the door behind him with a soft click that seemed to echo in the silence. He was dressed impeccably as always, but Catherine noticed a slight tension in his shoulders, a tightness around his eyes that spoke of countless complicated emotions. This man had loved Diana once, had been married to her, had watched their fairy tale marriage crumble in the most public way possible. "I was just looking," Catherine said, her voice steadier than she felt. She didn't move away from the case, didn't close the door. Something in her refused to act as though she had been doing something wrong. Charles approached slowly, his hands clasped behind his back in that characteristic pose he adopted when thinking carefully about his words. "It's a beautiful piece," he said finally, his voice neutral but not unkind. "She wore it to the Welsh National Opera Gala in 1991. I remember because she insisted on wearing it even though the Queen had suggested the pearl choker instead." The personal detail surprised Catherine. Charles rarely spoke of Diana, at least not in her presence. She watched as he came to stand beside her, both of them now looking at the necklace as if it were a religious relic. "William has spoken of it," Catherine ventured, unsure where this conversation was heading, but sensing its importance. "He said she loved the way the sapphires caught the light when she danced." A ghost of a smile crossed Charles's face, there, and gone so quickly Catherine might have imagined it. "She did love to dance," he said softly. "Even when everything else was falling apart, she never lost that joy in movement, in music." Catherine felt the weight of history in the room, the complexity of relationships that had shaped the royal family she had married into. She thought of William, probably in a meeting somewhere in the palace, unaware of this strange encounter between his wife and father over his mother's jewels. "Were you planning to wear it?" Charles asked, and there was something in his tone that Catherine couldn't quite identify. Not accusation, exactly, but a kind of careful probing. "I don't know," Catherine answered honestly. "I suppose I wanted to understand her better. Through the things she touched, the choices she made." "Does that sound foolish?" Charles was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried years of hard-won wisdom. "Not foolish, no, but perhaps misguided. Diana was not her jewels, Catherine. She was not her clothes, or her tiara, or even her title. She was a complicated, brilliant, flawed human being who did her best in impossible circumstances." Catherine felt tears prick at her eyes, though she couldn't have said exactly why. Perhaps it was the unexpected kindness in Charles's voice, or the way he spoke of Diana as a real person rather than the myth she had become. "The press already compares me to her constantly," Catherine said, giving voice to one of her deepest anxieties. "Everything I do, every outfit I wear, every cause I support, it's as if I'm competing with a ghost." Charles turned to face her fully then, and Catherine saw in his eyes a deep understanding. He too had lived in the shadow of Diana's memory, had been vilified in the press, had struggled to find his place in a narrative that had been written without his input. "May I give you some advice?" he asked, and Catherine nodded. "Don't try to be Diana. Don't try not to be Diana. Just be Catherine. The monarchy needs you to be yourself, not a reproduction of someone else, no matter how beloved they were." He reached past her then, gently closing the display case door. The click of the latch seemed to seal away more than just the necklace. It felt like the end of something and the beginning of something else. "These jewels will be yours one day," Charles continued, "along with many others. But they should come to you in the proper way, at the proper time. Not taken in a moment of impulse, but given as part of the continuity of the crown." Catherine felt ashamed then, but also grateful. Charles could have handled this so differently, could have been angry or cold or dismissive. Instead, he had shown her kindness and understanding. "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it. "I shouldn't have." "We all have moments of weakness," Charles interrupted gently. "Moments when the weight of expectation becomes too much and we act out of character. What matters is what we do next." They stood together in comfortable silence for a moment, two people who had never expected to be family, but who were bound together by love for William and duty to the crown. Catherine thought about the strange paths that had led them both here, the joys and sorrows that had shaped them. "She would have liked you," Charles said suddenly, surprising them both. "Diana, I mean, you have a similar sense of duty, a similar desire to use your position to help others. But you also have a steadiness that, well, that perhaps she and I both lacked in our youth." Catherine didn't know how to respond to this unexpected compliment, so she simply said, "Thank you." Charles glanced at his watch, ever mindful of the schedule that ruled their lives. "The Norwegian ambassador will be arriving soon. We should both prepare." As they moved toward the door, Charles paused. "Catherine, you're not in competition with Diana's memory. You are writing your own chapter in this long story. Make it a good one." He left then, leaving Catherine alone with her thoughts. She looked back at the display case, at the jewels glittering behind the glass. The necklace no longer called to her in the same way. She understood now that wearing Diana's jewels wouldn't bring her closer to understanding William's mother. That understanding would come through living, through facing the challenges of royal life with grace and determination, through raising her children to be kind and duty-minded, through finding her own way to serve. Later that evening, at the state dinner, Catherine wore a different necklace, one that had been selected for her by the Queen's dresser. She caught Charles's eye across the glittering table and saw his small nod of approval. William, seated beside her, took her hand under the table and squeezed it gently. "You look beautiful," he whispered, and Catherine knew he meant more than just her appearance. She squeezed back, feeling the weight of Diana's engagement ring on her finger, but no longer feeling overshadowed by it. The months that followed brought their own challenges. The press continued to draw comparisons, continued to analyze every gesture and outfit choice. But Catherine found herself less affected by it. She thought often of Charles's words, of the importance of being herself rather than trying to fill someone else's shoes. When she launched her first major charitable initiative, focusing on early childhood development, she did so with confidence in her own vision. The cause was different from Diana's landmines and AIDS work, but it carried the same spirit of using royal privilege to highlight important issues. Charles became an unexpected ally in her journey. He would sometimes share stories of Diana, not the sanitized versions for public consumption, but real memories that helped Catherine understand the complex woman who had been William's mother. He spoke of her compassion, but also her struggles, her triumphs, but also her vulnerabilities. She would have been proud of William's choice, he told Catherine one day, as they watched William play with Prince George in the gardens. She always wanted him to marry for love, to have the partnership that she and I couldn't give each other. Catherine appreciated these glimpses into the past, but she was more focused on the future. She was building her own relationships with the charities she supported, developing her own style of royal engagement that was warm but professional, accessible but dignified. The necklace remained in its case, unworn but not forgotten. Sometimes, when preparing for major events, Catherine would receive word that the Queen had made certain pieces available to her. Diana's jewelry began to appear in her collection, not stolen or grasped at, but given freely as part of her role in the family. The first time she wore the sapphire necklace was to a charity gala supporting children's hospices. William had fastened it around her neck himself, his hands steady despite the emotion in his eyes. She would have wanted it to be worn, he said simply, to be part of life, not locked away. As Catherine looked at herself in the mirror that night, she saw not a woman trying to be Diana, but a woman honoring her memory while creating her own legacy. The necklace was beautiful, but it was just jewelry. What mattered was what she did while wearing it, the lives she touched, the causes she championed. The incident in the palace sitting room became a turning point, though few people ever knew about it. It was the moment Catherine stopped trying to understand Diana through her possessions and started understanding her through her actions. It was also the beginning of an unexpected bond with Charles, built on mutual respect and shared experience. Years later, when Catherine's own daughter Charlotte asked about the grandmother she had never met, Catherine could speak of Diana with genuine warmth and understanding. She could share stories not just of the princess in the photographs, but of the woman who had loved her sons fiercely, who had struggled and triumphed and left behind a legacy of compassion. The jewelry became part of that story, worn on special occasions, but never defining the wearer. Catherine had learned that afternoon in the palace that true connection comes not from physical objects, but from understanding, empathy, and the courage to be oneself in the face of overwhelming expectation. Charles had been right. She had written her own chapter, and it was a good one. Not because she had become Diana, but because she had become fully herself, a woman capable of carrying the weight of the crown while remaining true to her own values and vision. The necklace continued to sparkle in its case, waiting for the next special occasion. But it no longer held the mythical power Catherine had once attributed to it. It was simply a beautiful piece of jewelry with a beautiful history, part of the continuing story of a family and a nation. In the end, that moment of temptation and intervention had taught Catherine the most valuable lesson of her royal life. That the greatest honor she could pay to Diana's memory was not to imitate her, but to learn from her journey and forge her own path with wisdom, grace, and authenticity. The palace walls had witnessed many dramas over the centuries, but this quiet confrontation between past and present, between memory and reality, between a father-in-law and daughter-in-law over the jewels of a woman they both honored in different ways, would remain one of the more poignant. It was a reminder that even in the most formal and tradition-bound institutions, human emotions and connections could create moments of unexpected understanding and growth. As Catherine continued her royal duties in the years that followed, she carried with her the lesson of that afternoon. True strength came not from grasping at the past, but from accepting it, learning from it, and then moving forward with purpose and authenticity. The jewels would always be there, beautiful reminders of those who had worn them before. But the real legacy was in the lives touched, the causes championed, and the example set for future generations. The story of that tense moment in the palace became part of family lore, shared quietly between William and Catherine, a reminder of how Charles had shown unexpected wisdom and kindness at a crucial moment. It reinforced the truth that families, even royal ones, are built on such small moments of understanding and forgiveness, of guidance and growth. And so the sapphire necklace remained in its case, neither forbidden nor forgotten, simply waiting for the right moment to once again catch the light and remind the world that beauty, like legacy, is best when shared, honored, and passed on with love and wisdom to those who come after.